لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِيمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, to settle the matters of dispute between the people. So now already, even prior to the coming of the prophets, the people have started disputing with each other. They've started experiencing this ikhtilaf. The prophet brings in this standard of revelation of scripture so as to settle those disputes. وَمَا اخْتَلَفَ فِيهِ, and nobody differed with it. Now, whatever it is, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوهُ, except those who were already blessed with it from before, that they had started differing in scripture itself, that they had some form of scripture before. And the Prophet comes in, brings in a new set of ayats of Allah, affirming those before and correcting them as well to settle the disputes that have come in, to confirm and to correct. People look at those and they have a similar response. من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات, after clear signs had reached them, بغيا بينهم, out of a jealous animosity to each other. Now their positions on truth is not necessarily based on standards of truth, it is based on jealous animosity. Positions of what is right and what is wrong are being taken not for logical reasons, but for psychological reasons. And usually psychological reasons which are unknown, or at least for the person making those claims, those psychological reasons are put to aside. I'm speaking without bias. This is wholly objective. This is wholly, this is entirely what the scripture is saying. Right? So ikhtilaf is taking place even with the messengers, even with their message. Scripture is being cited, referenced, and Allah unveils that the motivation or the reasoning is not logical but psychological. And what kind of psychology is being employed, or what kind of psychological reasoning? That which is unconscious. Specifically, what kind of unconscious reasoning is taking place? That which is out of a conceit, out of an arrogance, out of a jealousy against the other, and a sense of superiority for the self. That's where the ikhtilaf is coming from. فَهَدَى اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, but Allah guided the ones who believed. لِمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الْحَقِّ بِإِذْنِهِ, to the truth about which they differed by His permission. So how natural ikhtilaf is, and how the attitude of Iman, being open to ayat of Allah as and when they come to you, allows for this process of guidance to move forward. Despite this inner tendency to be biased to the point of being jealous, to the point of being arrogant. Wallahu yahdi man yasha'u ila siratim mustaqim. And Allah guides whomever He wills, whomever Allah wants, to the straight path. And this phrasing is used multiple times within the Quran. Wallahu yahdi man yasha'u ila siratim mustaqim. And the man is read both ways, that the man refers to Allah. Allah guides who Allah wants to the right path. And also, Allah guides whoever wants to be guided towards the right path. Right? So the man can go towards the human being as well. And we know from the Quran, the way the process of guidance is described, that it is it is mutual. It is Allah, of course, yes, His permission, His idhn, His grace, His rahmah, His fadl, all of that. But of course, the human being has to make choices as well. Human being has to open himself or herself as well, has to put aside that arrogance, that fixation in the face of the ayat of Allah. Am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannah. So do you think you will enter paradise? وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. Well, there have not come to you trials like the ones faced by those who have passed away before you. Because, yes, this ikhtilaf becomes incredibly daunting. This ikhtilaf becomes incredibly frustrating. Why so much ikhtilaf? Why do people have to be this way? Why can't everything be straightforward? Why can't everything be straightforward? Why can't Allah simply just spell out everything like a list? A, B, C, D. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Why is there so much of a room for interpretation in which people do derive their own meanings and then hold on to those meanings and then argue on their basis and then fight on their and the fights get ugly, the fights even get bloody? Why does it have to be like that? The fights that are not bloody, in which physical blood is not shed, but as far as emotional blackmail is concerned, as far as spiritual blackmail is concerned, no stone is left unturned. Any sort of emotional, spiritual abuse that you can possibly muster is put in there. So it gets incredibly frustrating. We could have all just been guided. Allah says, you think it's that simple? Do you really think that everything would be spoon fed to you like that? That you wouldn't have to go through what people before had to go through? This in itself, the room for interpretation that is left, and there will be people who will make legitimate use of that room, as there needs to be legitimate use for that room, in which the human faculties, the human abilities, that of reason and others, have to be employed justly, judiciously, according to some standards that is necessary. Otherwise, the human being, the role that Allah has in mind for the human being, Allah being the Rabb and the human being Abd and Ibad, the empowerment of the Ibad requires that judicious use of reason, that judicious use of some standards of knowledge, of the effort that is going to be put in to acquire, to continue to acquire knowledge and guidance, that room is there for that empowerment to really take place. That room is there for that process of growth to take place, in which these hurdles of bias, of jealousy, of arrogance, these are overcome. That room is there so that the human being is an active agent in this progression of history, not just a passive recipient, gets a command, follows it, that's it. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for there to be a greater room for the human being. We see in the entirety of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't get any ayah revealing to him right after Ta'if, okay, Yathrib, there's like Aus and Khazraj there, and they're pretty cool. They'll be really nice to you. Why don't you just go talk to them? That never happened. That never happened. And why don't you just, take off right now? That didn't happen. He, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had to struggle one camp after another, one tribe after another, one conflict after another, one abusive encounter after another, before finally Aus and Khazraj came into the picture. Before that migration, we read it retrospectively. We already know the story. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not know the story. He was actively involved in writing the story, taking choices. Other people's choices were being taken into consideration as well. So the room, whether it is scriptural interpretation, or it is interpretation of other ayat, or it is interpretation that leads to choices, strategic choices in one's lifetime, that room is there for that human involvement, for that human, uh, again, potential for good as well as potential for evil. And that results in conflict that becomes frustrating. The conflicts do get ugly. They get, you start looking at scripture weird. It does, the ikhtilaf and the extent to which the ikhtilaf has gotten in this day and age, where there is so much, and so much of it makes sense, and then so much of it doesn't. And the postmodern tendency to just equate all of it as equally wrong or equally right, and that negate that there is any al-haq at all, is very appealing. It is very attractive. It is very convenient, because once you do that, it liberates you of responsibility. It liberates you of um, a whole lot of the tediousness of the process itself. It is liberating to be settled on doubt. Doubt is a very natural, and we're going to talk about it today as well. It is a very natural part of the process of Iman, and it's the process of guidance and the process of knowledge. Very natural. But to fixate yourself on doubt and be okay with it and be satisfied with it, especially in matters of spiritual concern, religious concern, intellectual concern, you would not do that in any other aspect of your life. It's usually spiritual, religious, and intellectual that this kind uh, of an attitude is taken. In all other matters of immediate concern, hayatul dunya concern, where your food is concerned, where your livelihood is concerned, you would not settle for doubt. You would not just sit on doubt and be okay with it. I am doubtful for the rest of my life. I am okay being doubtful. Doubt is all we can get. We cannot get any faith at all. Those who have faith is just because they don't know any better and they're idiots. Okay, you want to give those explanations? Do you give those explanations when you make choices for your livelihood, what you're going to eat, who you're going to marry? Is that how you settle your opinion? Is that how you direct yourself towards any path in your life? So why these double standards? Where do these double standards come from? There, you're willing to overcome all obstacles of all the different choices that you have, of all the conflicting opinions that come in front of you, and you take a path. You never settle for doubt there. وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُم مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِن قَبْلِكُم. Well, there have not come to you trials like the ones faced by those who have passed away before you. مَسَّتْهُمُ الْبَأْسَاءُ وَالضَّرَّاءُ وَالزُّلْزِلُوا. How far did those conflicts get for the people before you? They were stricken by hunger and adversity, to the point of having tasted each other's war or potential for war. وَالزُّلْزِلُوا, and they were violently shaken. حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه, to the point that the prophet and the people who had believed with him cried out, Mata Nasrullah, when is the help of Allah coming? It got that bad. You're already frustrated. In, in your air-conditioned study rooms with your webcams and chat boxes where after every argument you're going to go and grab yourself a sundae, ice cream sundae, or whatever else. This is already getting to you. Do you have any idea how bad this ikhtilaf got? It led for the Prophet and the people close to the Prophet, the only people who had belief, who have the certificate of belief from Allah Himself, they were led to proclaim, when is the help of Allah coming? They're literally depicted as having, as holding on to the last threads of hope. The night has become darkest, and they're crying out, Mata Nasrullah. Ala inna nasrallahi qareeb. It is at that point, without a doubt, the help of Allah is around the corner. When it really gets that bleak, when you are so habituated to darkness that you have to call on every ounce of your willpower, every ounce of your capacity for faith to believe that light is possible. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. So they ask you, Ya Rasulullah, what should they spend in charity? قُلْ مَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ. Say, whatever you spend from wealth, فَلِلْوَالِدَيْنِ. Give it to the parents. The first, foremost right is to the parents. وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ, and the relatives. وَالْيَتَامَى, and the orphans. وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, and the helpless. وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, and the travelers. وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ, and whatever good you do, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Allah knows it fully well. A community in which Iman really has settled in is a community in which these segments of the society, they're protected, they're secure. Their vulnerabilities of age, their vulnerabilities of whatever difficulties they may have. Yatama will be handicapped in a society where your parents or your fathers in particular are the source of your social position, strength, security. They will be vulnerable. So the society looking out for them. Masakin, people who can't fend for themselves for one reason or the other. If they're protected, and not only protected in that they're economically, financially provided for them to socially belong. And we say this all the time, that infaq in the Quran is very importantly economic. Yes, it is financial, yes, but not just financial. You can be financially giving someone, and we will see this in these ayat. From here on in, the subject has already started for the past couple of passages, spending in the way of Allah, infaq. And why is that so important, so significant? The hypocrisy that settled in the Bani Israel, nifaq, hypocrisy, it is primarily a disease of not wanting to give, not wanting to sacrifice. All the dynamics that take place within a hypocrite, if you were to isolate them to one main problem, it is overwhelming selfishness, self-interest, predominating self-interest. Self-interest is everything at all costs, and typically the cost of the other. And so all of what we saw, the Bani Israel manifesting, what they did to the prophets, how they treated scripture, what their attitude was towards Allah, how ayat will come to them and they will refuse to acknowledge and refuse to believe. At the root of it is this attitude of being incredibly selfish. And so nifaq, hypocrisy, finds its remedy in infaq, in spending in the way of Allah, in spending in the way of Allah, which is important, yes, for community building financially, of course, but it is important for community building in terms of the personalities that develop, personalities that have identified the hypocritical tendencies that they have and are actively, perseverantly engaged in containing those tendencies. More than anything else, spending in the way of Allah is promising you that or helping you with that. As we will see, there are ways of spending that you can be spending, and the result is the exact opposite. Their hypocrisy is being reinforced. So we'll talk about that as well. So they're asking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and now the good questions have started coming in. We spoke about the bad questions of Bani Israel. These are the good questions coming from the community of believers around Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're concerned. We don't want to be hypocrites. We don't want to be like the Bani Israel. They're being described in the Quran. We want to be, the people who are actually doing Islah. So how much do we spend? Allah says, whatever you spend from your wealth, primarily make sure that these groups are addressed. And again, that's very interesting because this is not an in-group thing. This spending, the institution that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is developing, the authority that he is, the community leader that he is, what is coming to him, or what is being given to the government, so to speak, is but a fraction. The primary emphasis, as far as Iman is concerned, take care of those who are immediately in your vicinity. Take care of those first. Take care of the most vulnerable segments of the society. And even that which is the 2.5%, the zakats, that would be given to the government or to the political authorities, or even there, the dispensation is going to be foremost for the protection of the rights of these aspects of the society, or these incredibly important and significant facets, aspects, segments of that particular community. The masakin, the yatama, the aqrabin, the walidain, right? وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. And whatever good you do, for sure Allah knows it fully well. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالِ. Fighting has been prescribed upon you. وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Though it is disliked by you. It may well be that you don't like it. And for the most part, the way the Sahaba and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are by nature, most of them, and even if that's not their nature, what they have developed within themselves in Makkah is a discipline in which whatever fighting instinct they had, the instinct to retaliate, they've curbed it, they've kept it at bay. They have kept it at bay. They have disciplined themselves to the point where even if they wanted to retaliate, and they were all ready to retaliate, and we know that specifically for Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that as far as Hazrat Umar is concerned, for him to contain himself and not retaliate in the face of all the tortures, it was hell. For him to hold himself back and become this non-conflicting person, a non-retaliating person, a person who loves in the face of aggression. Now, for him to have developed that was quite an achievement. And other Sahaba as well, because we know for a fact that the Quraysh, we know for the fact that they're a warring people. They're a people of honor. They're people who wouldn't think twice before standing up for their honor, even if it is with their sword. So for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have managed to contain all of that for a good decade, It's pretty incredible. And now, after they've habituated to that, the demand is to flip it. Now you have to aggress. Now the doors to retaliation have opened. And it is going to be disliked by you because whatever natural appeal aggression may have had for some of you, that natural appeal is no longer there for how long you've disciplined yourself, for how long you've held yourself back. And so now the karaha towards the qital, that's an inner battle that has to be fought. Now the qital that takes place is not going to be for corruption. It is not going to be for exploitation. Precisely because it came after such a long time of defense and self-defense in the form of self-discipline. Now the people who are going to do it are going to do it because they have to, not because they want to. And because they're doing it because they have to, they'll regard all the boundaries that it comes with, all the restrictions that it comes with. See, there is a naturally aggressive person. And for that naturally aggressive person, there is no karaha towards qital. There is an excitement towards qital. There is a desire, a fervor, a zeal for conflict, for bloodshed. And for that person to find a religious reason to do that, it's what they're waiting for. And when such a person does find a religious reason to do that, out of context or whatever, when they do execute that, that results in chaos, that results in further exploitation, that results in further abuse. But here, the situation is such that the karaha is being had. وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Though it is disliked by you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا. And it is quite possible that you dislike something. وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. But it is better for you. So you dislike something at an emotional level, or you like something at an emotional level. But at an intellectual level, the recognition is that it is to be done or not to be done, whatever that value is. Again, the maturity of a human personality in developing these values independent of emotions. Independent of emotions. Emotions are going in one direction, values are going in the other direction. Typically, the values that you grow up with, the values that you are taught from parents, from environment, they're usually aligned with your emotions. Usually. They would be the superego values for those of you who have a sense of psychology. They would align with your emotions. But once you align yourself with scripture, once you align with yourself or open yourself up to the ayat of Allah, to truth and knowledge where it comes from, that is in resonance with your conscience, with another part of your psychology, which does not necessarily have to align with emotions. It aligns with truth. It aligns with truth that you've submitted to. It aligns with truth that you've accepted. And in fulfillment of that truth or those true values, a lot of times you will have to go against your emotions. A lot of times you'll have to go against your superego values. That inner conflict, the maturity of negotiating that, of being able to do what you have to, even when you don't like it, even when you don't feel like it, even when your heart's not into it, that's a spiritual growth. That's self-discipline coming in right there. That's a person becoming stronger. So you're praying and you don't feel like it, that's a very spiritual prayer. You're doing a lot. You're fasting throughout the day, not eating, even though you feel like eating. That's a spiritual act right there. Our conception of spirituality, where we align it with what we feel like doing, what we want to do, what we don't want to do, as a one-to-one correspondence is inadequate, is inadequate. And so a lot of us will feel very aspiritual, very distant and detached from Allah when the natural karaha for that which should be done according to our own values that we've attested to, submitted to, when we don't feel that motivation, the motivation seems to have gone. Ah, I'm not there with Allah anymore. The honeymoon period of religiosity is over. I don't feel it anymore. I have become so distant. It's natural. And to carry on in that state, that's incredible. And there will come a time where this becomes the consistent practice, that the alignment takes place where now your emotions align with your conscience as well. But that's a struggle. That's a struggle extending years at least. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا, and it may well be that you like something, وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ, and it is bad for you. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ, and Allah knows, وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, you don't know. This is what it means to submit to Allah as Allah. That He is telling me my ilm, my knowledge, as it conforms with my emotions, is telling me one thing, and Allah is telling me something else. Submission is to recognize that. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الشَّهْرِ الْحَرَامِ قِتَالٍ فِيهِ. They ask you concerning fighting during this sacred month. قُلْ قِتَالٌ فِيهِ كَبِيرٌ. Tell them fighting during these months, it is a big deal. It's a great sin. وَصَدٌّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَكُفْرٌ بِهِ. But preventing people from the path of Allah and rejecting Him. وَالْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. And preventing people from entering the holy mosque. وَإِخْرَاجُ أَهْلِهِ مِنْهُ. And driving out its citizens, its inhabitants. Akbar, when the Allah is greater in the sight of Allah. So this was the incident that happened, the incident of Nakhla. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had sent out an expedition, and he has started to do that. That when the Quraysh, their primary economic stronghold is their trade, their caravans. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, immediately after migration, after having settled down, sets his target straight. Their caravans, their trade routes. We're not letting them go. We're not letting them breathe easy. When they've done with us whatever they've done with us, they have the Kaaba hostage, and they're not letting the true heirs of Ibrahim alayhi salam rid it of the idolatrous center that it has become, or rid it of its idolatry, and take away that what it's propagating in terms of idolatry in the name of tolerance. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sets his eyes straight on these trade routes, instigating the Quraysh, coming out with this economic strangulation on them. And so he would send scouts, armed scouts, to monitor the movement of these caravans as well. And the rules were pretty clear in terms of they would only initiate any attack, one, when the permission had been given to them by Allah, by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they would keep the sanctity of the holy month in place. That was an Arab tradition, an Arab value that the Quran validated, that this is how it is, and we will value the sacred months. There will be no fighting in the sacred months. Again, it is the tribal laws of war, of when to fight and when not to fight. That's a given, and they're accepted as such. As far as the Arabs were concerned, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam aggressing against the caravans of the Quraysh was not out of place. It was the order of the day. It was how they operated. It was how they worked. To have expected for them to operate any other way would have meant to not take the material conditions of reality of that day and age into consideration, which is what Allah would never advocate. He would want that they be taken seriously and you work accordingly. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in accordance with those values, and within those values, as okay as it is to target caravans from, if you do belong to another tribe, it is not okay to do so in the sacred months. There has to be this time of peace. Now, as it happened, one of the scouting expeditions that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had sent in the valley of Nakhla, close to Mecca, when the sacred month had just started, it just so happened that they attacked the Quraysh, or the people of Quraysh. However, one or two of them that were there, um, because it was a golden chance. Now, when they brought back what they did bring back of the the war booty, or that booty from that little battle, they Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam refused to accept it. He didn't say anything, he didn't accept it. It's a sacred month, should not have happened. Allah subhanahu, and the Quraysh made a lot of hue and cry. They look at these people, they advocate values, they advocate moralities, and the sacred months could not be honored, and they shed our blood in sacred months, and they shed our blood in the sacred months, and they shed our blood in the sacred months. That's their Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals these ayat and says, you're right, sacred months, fighting in the sacred months, big deal, big sin. But all of what you've done, all the perpetrations, and again, against, these are not against the Quranic values. These are against the values of the Quraysh, their values of hospitality, their values of allowing or opening the Kaaba, the Masjid al-Haram, to everybody, their values of honoring kith and kin, their values of honoring blood in the vicinity of the Haram. It's all of those values that are being violated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that all of these values are henceforth Quranic values, and you did violate all of them, Quranic as well as your own tradition. And so don't come out with the spiritual blackmail trying to indict Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba and play victim. Akbaru indallah, that's much greater in the sight of Allah. Wal fitnatu akbaru min qatl, and fitna is worse than killing. What you're doing, using that religious pedestal, using that as that religiosity for political strength and power, and therefore exploitation, people's lives, their livelihood, their their personal protection, their belongings, their honor, none of that is safe with all of what's going on. That is worse. So وَلَا يَزَالُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, and they will continue fighting against you. So you're not doing any good by giving up arms. They're going to continue to fight against you حَتَّى يَرُدُّكُمْ عَنْ دِينِكُمْ, until they turn you back from your religion. إِنِ اسْتَطَاعُوا, if they can. وَمَنْ يَرْتَدِدْ مِنْكُمْ عَنْ دِينِهِ, and those of you who turn back from their religion, فَيَمُتْ وَهُوَ كَافِرٌ, and die as disbelievers, فَأُولَٰئِكَ حَبِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُم, such are those whose deeds have become worthless, everything that they've done, and they've migrated from Mecca to Medina. فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ, in this life and the hereafter, but أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ, and they're going to be the companions of the hellfire, هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, and they will live therein forever. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, definitely those who believe, وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and those who migrate and struggle in the cause of Allah, أُولَٰئِكَ يَرْجُونَ رَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ, these are the ones who hope for the mercy of Allah, وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, and Allah is forgiving and merciful. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ, they ask you about wine and gambling. قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ, tell them there is great sin in both of them. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, although with some benefits for the people as well. So there's great harm, but not to say that there's absolute harm. There's some benefits as well. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. But their sin is greater than their benefit. The harm that it brings about and the sin incurred therefore is greater. But perhaps at this point, because it hasn't been prohibited, especially khamar, to call it a sin may not be all that appropriate. Or to translate this as sin, this ithm as sin may not be appropriate, especially since it's being contrasted with from the manafi' or the naf'ihima, the benefit of it, right? So the harm and the benefit. The harm is greater than their benefit. It's left at that. As of now, the prohibition hasn't come in. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. And they ask you what to spend in charity. قُلِ الْعَفْ. Tell them, spend what is the surplus. The previous question, who to give the charity to? Now, how much should we give in charity? Again, the response is kept open. Whatever is surplus, whatever is excess, left to you. Left to you. So much of it, and so much of the miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba is that the great chunk of their struggle was voluntary. There was no obligation as such. It was so much of it was out of the goodness of their hearts, out of the freedom that they could have not done it, and technically, legally, Islamically, it was totally fine. But they went over and above and beyond in seeking excellence in doing all of what they did. قُلِ الْعَفْ. Tell them to spend that which is surplus. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ. This is how Allah makes all His ayats clear to you. This is how Allah makes His ayat clear to you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So that you may reflect. So they ask, how much should we give? Allah doesn't give an exact number, even though He could have, but He doesn't. Why doesn't He? Because He wants to leave room for your tatafakkarun, so that your brains don't atrophy, so your reason doesn't shrivel away, so that your choice has a role to play in all of this. Fit dunya wal akhirah. In this life as well as in the hereafter. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى. And they ask you regarding the orphans. قُلْ إِصْلَاحٌ لَهُمْ خَيْرٌ. Tell them improvement, islah, their growth, their rehabilitation within society is the best that you can do. وَإِن تُخَالِطُوهُمْ. But if you mix your affairs with theirs, فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ. After all, they are your brothers. See, the sense that the Quran raised with respect to minding or guarding the rights and being careful of not being hurtful or in any way exploitative and abusive of those that are vulnerable in the society. The extent to which the Quran goes made the Sahaba very nervous. It made the Sahaba very anxious. What if, to the point of being very careful about, sense, as we would say, and the very little, the smallest of possibilities. Okay, so there's an orphan that one Sahabi is taking care of, and another Sahabi is taking care of, and they have their, it's all in the same household, and it is their wealth or their right. What if somehow something, one grape here or there, one date here or there got mixed up? His came to our lot. Maybe my kid ate one of theirs. That can't be right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you try your best for their islah, but if these things get mixed up, that's okay. They are your brothers after all. They are your brothers after all. Wallahu ya'lamul mufsida min al-muslih. Allah knows the one who's looking to exploit, who's looking to create fasad, from the one who's looking to reform. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَأَعْنَتَكُمْ. And if Allah wanted, He could put you in difficulty. He would say, why did that one date go from his to his? No, 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 no. He's not going to do that. In Allah Azizun Hakim. Allah is Aziz. He is mighty and wise. وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكَاتِ. And do not marry the mushrik women حَتَّى يُؤْمِنَّ. Until they come to believe. وَلَأَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكَةٍ. And believing slave woman is better than a mushrik free woman. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ. Even though that she might seem really good looking to you. وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And do not let your women get married to mushrik men حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا. Until they believe. وَلَا عَبْدٌ مُؤْمِنٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكٍ. Because a Muslim slave is better than a free mushrik. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكُمْ. Even though he may be drop dead gorgeous for you. أُولَٰئِكَ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ. Because these mushrik, they are inviting to the hellfire. That whatever state their polytheism has brought them to, and their commitment to their polytheism has brought them to, the goodness that it has to offer for the family and for the society that you're looking to develop here. For now, that's cut off. That's been put on. You can't. There's too little to gain and too much to lose. Wallahu yad'u ila al-jannati wal maghfirati bi'idhni. Allah invites towards paradise and forgiveness by His permission. وَيُبَيِّنُ آيَاتِهِ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. And He makes His ayat clear to mankind so that they can receive admonition, so that they can remember. Continuing with ayah number 222, which is the 28th ruku. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. They ask you about menses. قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى. Tell them it is a discomfort. فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. So keep away from your wives in terms of sexual intercourse during their menses. It doesn't mean boycott them or lock them up in a room or do not touch them at all. It is not to be taken in that sense. It means just the particular coital act is what you abstain from. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ. So do not engage in coitus until they are clean. فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ. But when they do purify themselves, فَآتُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ. Approach them the way Allah has prescribed for you. Now, you will not find any place in the Quran where Allah prescribes or Allah ordains how is it that you're supposed to have sexual intercourse. The amarakumullah is biologically implied. It is something that is biologically obvious, right? The ayat in biology are telling you how that process is supposed to work. Inna Allaha yuhibbu tawwabin. And Allah loves those who constantly return to Him. Wa yuhibbul mutatahhirin. And He loves those who purify themselves. Nisa'ukum harthul lakum. Your wives are tilth for you. فَأْتُوا حَرْثَكُمْ أَنَّا شِئْتُمْ. So approach them as you wish. وَقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ. And send forward for yourselves. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. And observe the taqwa of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّكُمْ مُلَاقُوهُ. And know that you will meet Him. Again, addressing that very strict monastic tendency, that ascetic tendency, which would look down upon any such aspect of sexuality, is addressed, is called to account and explicitly addressed that as far as the spirituality of this Quran is concerned, or the spirituality that Ar-Rahman is ordaining in the Quran through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's not what it means to be spiritual, right? There is no spirituality or no greatness in asceticism per se. You're not doing Allah any favors by not marrying. You're not doing Allah any favors by marrying and then abandoning your wives altogether, right? That there is good for you in this interaction, in a sexual interaction, that there is good for your future in this interaction, that this is something that you put forward for, or this is something that you invest in your future for, is what is ordained, and that's something that you need to take into consideration. وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and give good news to the believers. وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا اللَّهَ عُرْضَةً لِأَيْمَانِكُمْ, and do not make Allah an excuse as in your oaths. أَن تَبَرُّوا وَتَتَّقُوا وَتُصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, lest you abstain from virtue, warding against evil, and reconciling between people. So when activities that promote good, virtue, birr, activities that promote taqwa, activities that promote islah and mending relationships between humanity, not engaging in all of this in the name of God. In the name of God. And so the asceticism or the monasticism that looks upon sexual relationships, marriages, as anti-spiritual or even aspiritual, Allah says, don't put that one on me. In a sense, there is birr in this relationship, there is taqwa in this relationship, and this relationship leads to islah bayna nas, humanity coming closer together, humanity becoming more of a community. So all of what this promises, and your oaths in the name of Allah, because the oath of I'm forgetting the technical phrase, but there is a technical phrase in the language of the church, or Catholicism in particular, which they don't marry, right? For the nuns or the priests, it is a matter of great virtue to not marry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very bluntly puts it out there that don't do that in my name. Is at least what the spirituality that the Quran is looking to inspire. In the name of God, you're stopping people from birr, taqwa, islah bayna nas, all of these things. The Quranic spirituality sanctions sexuality. It does not demand an abstinence from that. As far as the Quranic spirituality is concerned, bir, taqwa, and islah bayna nas is developed through this marital relationship. Wallahu sami'un alim. And Allah is hearing and knowing. La yu'akhidhukum Allahu bil-laghwi fi aymanikum. Allah will not hold you accountable for what is unintentional in your oaths. Walakin yu'akhidhukum bima kasabat qulubukum. But He will hold you responsible. But He will hold you responsible for what you earn, or the deeds that you do through the intention of your hearts, that you're committed to, that you have consciously intended to do. Wallahu ghafurun halim, and Allah is forgiving and forbearing. لِلَّذِينَ يُؤْلُونَ مِن نِسَائِهِمْ, and those who take an oath to abstain from their wives. تَرَبُّصُ أَرْبَعَةِ أَشْهُرٍ. There is a limit to wait for 4 months. The maximum they can go is 4 months. فَإِن فَأَوُوا, but if they reconcile, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, then for sure Allah is forgiving and merciful. وَإِنْ عَزَّمُوا الطَّلَاقَ, and if they decide to divorce, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ, then Allah is hearing and knowing. وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ, and divorced women must keep to themselves, waiting for 3 menstrual periods. وَلَا يَحِلُّ لَهُنْ, and it is not permissible for them أَن يَكْتُمْنَ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ فِي أَرْحَامِهِنَّ, that they hide what Allah has created in their wombs. That in this time period, to be absolutely sure that there is no pregnancy, and if there is a pregnancy, they're not to hold back from sharing that from the biological father. In kunna yu'minna billahi wal yawmil akhir, if they really believe in Allah and the last day, no amount of spite, no amount of resentment or hatred that there may be against the former spouse should lead for them to hold back this information. وَبُعُولَتُهُنَّ أَحَقُّ بِرَدِّهِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ, and their husbands have a greater right to take them back within that time period. In aradu islaha, if all of them want reconciliation. وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and they have privileges just like they have responsibilities. This is not simply an interaction of exploitation. This is not to be a relationship in which they are subjugated. They have privileges just as they have responsibilities, bil ma'ruf, according to what is reasonable, according to what is acceptable. That the urf, how the word in itself and the Quranic usage of it takes your society and their social norms into consideration. Urf, ma'ruf, is what is understood to be good. It is like a normative thing. It's like social norms, the way they hold it. وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ, but men do have a degree of status above them. There is one level in particular, and that of financial responsibility that the men have. They are the caretakers, so there is that additional degree that they are given. Wallahu azizun hakim, and Allah is mighty wise. To use that to make it absolute, that it is complete absolute authority with no right to the spouse, again, that is a distorted, diseased, and pathological way of looking at it. And if you take that diseased pathological lens, then yes, the use of the metaphor tilth or cultivation land, it is going to be read as such as well. That there is no what that metaphor is used to represent is sidelined altogether, and an objectification is read into it from either of the two camps. The camps that look to criticize the Quran for the way it's representing this relationship, and the camp that wants to use the Quran to justify their misogynistic ends. Wallahu azizun hakim, and Allah is mighty and wise. At-talaqu marratan, the revocable divorce, the divorce that can be that you can remarry despite, is twice. The third time the divorce takes place, then that's it. Remarriage has to wait for another marriage to take place. So divorce, the 3-month waiting period within which they can return to each other, and then if they do return to each other after that time period is over, even that is okay. But then a second divorce, again, within that 3-month period they can come back, but then even after that they choose to reconcile and come back, that's fine as well. But then if they divorce for a third time and they don't reconcile within that 3-month period and the third divorce is done, then no getting back together, no remarriage. فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَصْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ, then keep her in an acceptable way or let go with good treatment. There is such a thing as a good divorce. There should be such a thing as an honorable parting of ways, a respectful, loving parting of ways, and there is such a thing. We will find examples around us in which a couple does end up divorcing, but they are on the best of terms when they part ways, and they are respectful of each other's honor, of each other's privacy. They don't feel the need, their
insecurities do not mandate upon them to just throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at their ex. That's a vile thing to do. That is the lowest that human beings can possibly sink to, is to justify, in order to justify themselves and their or even victimize themselves, they have to disclose, they feel the need to disclose pretty much everyone and anyone who's willing to lend them an ear how that marriage was, or that divorce was completely and absolutely the other person's fault. They may not say it. The statements or the narratives will begin with, nobody is perfect, we all have our flaws, we all make mistakes, and I'm sure I made some too, but what follows after the but is pretty much, it was absolutely and entirely his/her fault. And I have been entirely victimized in this entire process. So there is such a thing as a ma'ruf way or ihsan way of parting ways. Well, see, the choice of words, right? The imsak bi ma'ruf, stay together in a good way. Aw tasrih, or leave, let the parting of ways take place. Let her go bi ihsan, in a beautiful way. So the word used is the one depicting beauty. Like your character should effuse beauty, a beautiful divorce. Have you ever heard that phrase before? But that's the one the Quran is advocating. وَلَا يَحِلُّ لَكُمْ, and it is not lawful for you أَن تَأْخُذُوا مِمَّا آتَيْتُمُوهُنَّ شَيْئًا, that you take back from them anything of what you had given them, إِلَّا أَن يَخَافَا, except when both parties fear أَلَّا يُقِيمَا حُدُودَ اللَّهِ, that they may not be able to keep within the limits of Allah. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا يُقِيمَا حُدُودَ اللَّهِ, so if you fear that both will not be able to maintain or keep to the limits of Allah, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا, then as a result of a mutual agreement, there is no blame on either of the two, فِيمَا افْتَدَتْ بِهِ, on account of what she compensates the husband to retain the divorce. تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ, these are the limits set by Allah. فَلَا تَعْتَدُوهَا, do not cross them. وَمَنْ يَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ, and those who do cross the limit set by Allah, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ, such are the unjust ones. فَإِنْ طَلَّقَهَا فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ مِنْ بَعْدٍ, but if he divorces her, it will not be lawful for him to remarry her after that. This is the third divorce. حَتَّى تَنْكِحَ زَوْجًا غَيْرَهُ, until she gets married to somebody else. فَإِنْ طَلَّقَهَا, but if he also divorces her, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يَتَرَاجَعَا, there is no blame on either of them if they reunite. إِنْ ظَنَّا أَنْ يُقِيمَا حُدُودَ اللَّهِ, provided they think that they can maintain the hudud, the limits of Allah. وَتِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ, these are the limits of Allah. يُبَيِّنُهَا لِقَوْمِ يَعْلَمُونَ, which he makes clear for those who know. Now, again, all of what these limits, these are the outer boundaries within which a marriage is supposed to operate. You don't establish the entire dynamic of a relationship on the boundaries or close to the boundaries. And what do I mean by that is, you cannot have the principles of relationship or the manner in which husband and wife relate with each other based on strict rules that are being derived from those boundaries. The contract or the rules of engagement, if you will, they're for matters of severe conflict when they come in. They cannot be used, you cannot operate in a marriage or function in a marriage based strictly off of fiqhi rules. Within that landscape, away from the boundaries, there is that interaction of love, of consideration, of mutual respect. which should take precedence, which the Quran highlights in so many other places as well, right? The ma'ruf treatment, the ihsan treatment, that's to each other, that mutual respect, that mutual love that you're supposed to share with each other. That doesn't necessarily look to conform to rigid rules. It's flexibility is the name of the game in a relationship. Which is why the rules are so little to begin with. They're so much on the fringe or the outer boundary of where that relationship is taking place. And yeah, but when a severe conflict situation does arise, the rule book has to be opened up. And then you have to look to work around those and negotiate with those in mind. At that point, ignoring those rules is the biggest mistake you can possibly make. Because then you're opening the doors to exploitation more than ever. وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, and when you have divorced women, فَبَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ, and they have reached the end of their waiting period, فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ سَرِّحُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ, then either take them back on reasonable basis or set them free in a reasonable way. وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا لِتَعْتَدُوا, do not retain them in order to harm them for exploitation, just to retaliate, get back at them. وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ, and whoever does that, فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ, he has been unjust to himself. Whenever a couple, man or woman, do not honor the other in the relationship and exploit and abuse, then what they've done, they have abused and exploited the other for sure, but there is a more subtle and significant, which is why that is the one that has been brought up over here, the abuse against the own self, the exploitation of your own self. You've gone against your own better potential. You've gone against your own better self. So you have done dhulm against your own self. That's one lesson that we get from this ayah, and another one that hurting them is hurting yourself. Doing dhulm against them, they're an extension of you. You're an extension of them. You're clothes for each other. And in not guarding that, not honoring that, you're just hurting how the two of you extend from and to each other. How you are one unit. Not regarding the one unit with distinct individualities, yes, but those distinct individualities come to form something which is distinctive and individual in its own right. And you've done dhulm against that. وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا, do not take the ayat of Allah as a joke. The last thing people are usually concerned about in matters of divorce are the ayats of Allah. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ, keep in mind Allah's favor upon you. وَمَا أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ يَعِظُكُمْ بِهِ, and what He has sent down to you in the form of the kitab, the commandments and wisdom, يَعِظُكُمْ بِهِ, and He exhorts you thereby, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, and observe the taqwa of Allah. Because you can have all of these, the kitab aspect, the principles, the laws, the hikmah, the wisdom behind the laws, the principles, the boundaries, all of that. You can have all of it. You can be very well versed in them. But minus the taqwa of Allah, you can exploit those very laws. You can abuse on the basis of those very principles. وَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ, and Allah knows. Know that Allah knows everything. وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, when you have divorced women, فَبَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ, and they reach the end of their waiting period, فَلَا تَعْذُلُوهُنَّ أَن يَنْكِحْنَ أَزْوَاجَهُنَّ, do not prevent them from marrying their prospective husbands. Do not become creeps. إِذَا تَرَاضَوْا بَيْنَهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, if they have mutually agreed in the normal way. Stop stalking them and raising obstacles in their path, and then signing into their Facebook accounts and sending hate messages to the other person, and then looking to get to the other person and bad mouthing your ex, and you're stop being creeps. إِذَا تَرَاضَوْا بَيْنَهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, if they have mutually agreed in the normal way, ذَلِكَ يُوعَظُ بِهِ, this is instructed to مَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, whoever of you really believed in Allah on the last day. ذَلِكُمْ أَزْكَى لَكُمْ وَأَطْهَرُ, that is purer for you, that is better for you, that is so much cleaner, neater, Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. Allah knows and you don't know. Don't get dirty in these matters. Keep it clean. وَالْوَالِدَاتُ يُرْضِعْنَ أَوْلَادَهُنْ. And the mothers will breastfeed their offspring حَوْلَيْنِ كَامِلَيْنِ for 2 complete years. لِمَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُتِمَّ الرَّضَاءَ. And whoever wishes to complete the nursing period, وَعَلَى الْمَوْلُودِ لَهُ رِزْقُهُنَّ وَكِسْوَتُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. The father is responsible for the provision of the mother and clothing according to acceptable norms. Whatever is socially acceptable, right? So despite the divorce, a nursing mother has to be maintained. The maintenance is the responsibility of the father. And it has to be in acceptance with their standards, with their social standards. لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها. No individual is burdened more than his capacity. لا تضار والدة بولدها. Neither a mother should be made to suffer because of her child. Now, you're emotionally blackmailing a mother, not financially reimbursing her. And for the most part, she will not be in a position to financially stand for herself in that critical condition, having to breastfeed, having to nurse a child, and she has to do that because it's her child, and of course she loves the child. And the financial recompensation, the coverage that you need to give, you're not giving, is exploiting and hurtful. وَلَا مَوْلُودٌ لَهُ بِوَالِدِهِ. Nor should the father to whom the child belong be made to suffer because of the child. It shouldn't be that the financial compensation is more than what he's making or what he needs to survive on his own. It needs to be reasonable. وَعَلَى الْوَارِثِ مِثْلُ ذَلِكَ. The father's inheritors are under the same obligation. So it may well be that the mother, in the demand for the financial compensation, I am breastfeeding your child, you need to give me, $1 million a month. What does he do? What if he doesn't? What if he can't do that? And most likely he won't be able to do that. You can't go to those extents using the emotional bond. See, you're divorced, fair enough, but as the father of the child and as the mother of the child, you're now indirectly related. As you're each other's ex, fair enough, you may get away with not having to see each other's faces for the rest of your lives. You can do that. But if you have a child or children, those interactions are inevitable. And the dirtier those interactions, the less civil those interactions, the less respectful those interactions, the worse the outcome for the children. The worse the outcome for the children. And we know this straight out. There's credible evidence to this. An abusive marriage, a marriage marred by parental conflict, constant fight, constant mutual emotional, even physical abuse going on, necessarily has a negative impact on the children, necessarily on their personalities and how the personalities develop. It's empirically demonstrable. We've seen it, we know it, we have it quantified. But a healthy divorce would be much better in terms of the impact that it has. And when we're talking an impact on the personalities of the children, we're talking an impact on the spiritual capacities of the children. Because it may well be that the damage that is done to the emotional dimension or to the personality of the children, it takes away from them something beautiful, something incredibly essential for a healthy spiritual development as well. And it's not without a lot of effort. You cannot recover that damage without putting in a lot of effort, whatever that effort looks like. But prevention is better than cure, right? So an abusive marriage or an abusive divorce, either way, the children, their personalities and therefore their spiritual capacities, their religious potential has to suffer as a consequence. So these issues cannot be taken lightly. These issues cannot be taken lightly. When we're talking about the mutual agreements, arrangements post-divorce, they have to be taken very, very seriously. You cannot have arrangements in which whenever the father has a right for visitation or whatever, or the mother has a right for visitation or whatever, they don't let any opportunity to go by without bad-mouthing him and his family or her and her family. You may be venting, you may be letting it out, but the kid is not your therapist. The kid is not supposed to be that sponge that sucks up all your filth and your dirt. The kid is a kid. And they're developing a person. They have to live with the filth that you're showing them of their other parent and depicting of yourselves. What kind of a self-concept are they growing up with? Because they know that they're half you and half them. Half of them is dirty because of what the dirt you told them about, and then half of them is dirty because you're the source, you're the one bad-mouthing. One is a bad mouth, the other is a bad person. Both of them culminated in the child. What kind of an impact is that having? A beautiful divorce. A beautiful divorce versus the dirt that we see. Even when people who come from such toxic environments, toxic, abusive households, where the parents are constantly disrespecting each other, constantly, either within the marriage or within a divorce, whatever the situation. The personalities that develop as a result of this, and they end up becoming religious, they end up committing themselves to a religious understanding, a particular religion, a religious movement, a religious institution. They need to be extra careful that all the manifestations of pathological religiosity that we spoke about within the Bani Israel, within the Munafiqeen and the description in the Quran, the chances for those pathologies reflecting in them and them being pathologically spiritual and pathologically religious are incredible. And it's very scary. There has to be an added degree of caution. There needs to be an added degree of suspicion so that these issues are addressed. A lot of times professionally. If not for your own sanity, and if not for your own good, then for your spiritual responsibility, for your social responsibility, for the kind of religiosity that emanates from you has a social impact. It has a social impact. For the sake of that, you need help. And you need to address those issues and those conflicts and those challenges. And be more mindful of how that toxicity becomes toxic religiosity and toxic spirituality. These are facts that we have to live with. These are the facts that we have to encounter. And then when those issues are taken seriously, then when those issues are addressed, what we're looking at is a much more mature spiritual person who has overcome that toxicity. The spiritual potential that will now be manifest is going to be far greater, is going to be far more impactful, is going to be far more beautiful than what was taking place before. So as much as those abusive and toxic experiences, as much as they set us up for reflecting or manifesting toxic religiosities and toxic spiritualities, being conscious, mindful, and aware of that toxicity and addressing them through our religious and spiritual struggles makes for incredibly beautiful human beings, makes for incredibly beneficial spirituality for the person as well as for the people around them. Right? So both sides, we have to be mindful of. Toxic environments do not necessarily mean you have to develop pathologies and become a toxic person. That's not a given. The probability and the chances for that do go up, but human choice, nevertheless, is to be taken into consideration. Human freedom has to be taken into consideration, and it does play a part. Moving right along. فَإِنْ أَرَادَ فِصَالًا عَنْ تَرَاضٍ مِّنْهُمَا وَتَشَاوُرٍ. But if both mutually consent and after due consultation desire weaning, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا. Then there is no blame on them. So there's a lot of consultation and discussion going on for all the mutual decisions that have to take place. وَإِنْ أَرَدْتُمْ أَن تَسْتَرْضِعُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ. But if you decide to have a foster mother for your children, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ. Then there is no blame on you. There shouldn't be any spiritual blackmail going on, or you're not living up to your motherly responsibilities by not doing this. إِذْ سَلَّمْتُمْ إِذَا سَلَّمْتُمْ مَا آتَيْتُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Provided you pay in accordance with the norms. The foster mother should not be exploited either. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. And observe the taqwa of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. And know that Allah is watching all of what you do. وَالَّذِينَ يَتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ. And those of you who pass away, وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا. And leave widows, يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرًا. These women, the widows, should wait for 4 months and 10 days. فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ. But when they reach the end of their waiting period, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي مَا فَعَلْنَ فِي أَنفُسِهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. There is no blame on you in what they do for themselves in a decent manner. وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرٌ. Allah is aware of all of what you do. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ. And there is no blame on you فِي مَا عَرَضْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ. If you just hint at these women a proposal for marriage, أو أكننتم في أنفسكم, or you keep it to yourselves, علم الله أنكم ستذكرونهن. Allah knows that you will mention to them, ولكن لا تواعدوهن سرا. But be careful not to make a secret agreement with them, إلا أن تقولوا قولا معروفا. Except that you do something which is normative, which is acceptable. وَلَا تَعْزِمُوا عُقْدَةَ النِّكَاحِ. But do not firmly resolve the marriage contract حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْكِتَابُ أَجَلَهُ. Until the prescribed waiting period comes to an end. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. And bear in mind that Allah knows what is within yourselves. It should not become so much of a taboo that remarriage is tantamount to adultery. That somebody, and one of the reasons why there will be post-divorce and post-death of a husband or death of a wife, a greater incidence of adultery, is because remarriage will have become such a taboo that there will be sentences and adjectives that are reserved for people who are looking, oh, how desperate is she? She couldn't hold himself, could she? He can't hold himself. Look at how... Where is all of this coming from? Allah knows ma fi anfusikum, exactly what is inside of yourselves. This sort of what do you call it? These perverted understandings of sexuality within a society, these perverted understandings of marriage and relationships within a society, then necessarily result in sexual perversions and extramarital, premarital, postmarital, post-divorce, post-death perverted relationships taking place. You make taboo what was not supposed to be taboo, and this is what you're opening the door to. And this is what is then prevailing in the society. But of course, this is the Quran, right? And what does the Quran know about what should and should not happen? So typically when these ayat are confronted and spoken about, and Mudarrisin will talk about them, and there's there's going to be translations of them and explanations of them. But when the actual situations arise, those slogans, those sentences, those appellations, those derogatory remarks, they're not going to be withheld. वो सब तो ठीक है, it is Quran, but, and then after the but is the entire making taboo of all of that. So one of the most frequent problems that we encounter within our clinical practice is women, after having experienced divorce, looking to remarry, and how they're going to have to confront the society and their own families for even wanting to do that or harboring the intent for that. It is one of the most serious problems. That what is everybody going to say? I want to get married again. And wait till my ex-husband finds out. Wait till his family finds out. OMG. What kind of a social media campaign are we looking for to tarnish my reputation? That's what she divorced for to begin with. She didn't want to. She was in love with him since day one. And all of those, oh my God. But this is just the Quran, right? أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ فَاحْذَرُوهُ. Beware of him. Really, the people who resort to these vile strategies, who take this, making these things taboo and talking, gossiping, slandering about these issues, they take it so lightly. Allah is like, فَاحْذَرُوا. Beware of him. وَاعْلَمُوا and know أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. Allah is forgiving and forbearing. لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء. There is no blame on you if you divorce women. ما لم تمسوهن. Even before having consummated your marriage with them. أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة. Or having fixed a dowry for them. ومتعوهن. Give them something anyway. على الموسئ قدره. The wealthy according to his means. وعلى المقتر قدره. And the poor according to his means. متاعا بالمعروف حقا على المحسنين. As a fair provision, a duty upon people of ihsan, people looking for a beautiful conduct. وَإِن طَلَّقْتُمُوهُنَّ مِن قَبْلِ أَن تَمَسُّوهُنَّ. And if you divorce them before having consummated your marriage with them, وَقَدْ فَرَضْتُمْ لَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً. While you have fixed a dowry for them, فَنِصْفُ مَا فَرَضْتُمْ. Then give them half of what you had fixed. إِلَّا أَن يَعْفُونَ. Unless they let it go. أَوْ يَعْفُوَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ عُقْدَةُ النِّكَاحِ. Or the one in whose hands the tie of the marriage is, if they forego their half of the full payment. So the husband forgoes and he just goes ahead and gives the full amount. وَأَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. And if you forgo, addressing the men specifically, if you let go, if you just give the full amount, that is closer to taqwa, that is better. وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. Do not forget graciousness between yourselves. You want Allah to be, you understand Allah to be Dhul Fadl, the one who is gracious and gives you more than you deserve. Then when your mutual interactions are taking place, why does this statement, what's in it for me? Why should I do it? He never does it. She never does it. Why should I go? Do not forget fadl bainakum, between yourselves. Inna Allah bima ta'maluna basir. Allah is definitely watching whatever you do. Hafidhu ala salawat. Guard the prayers. Wa salatil wusta. Especially the middle one. So is this is talking about the Salatul Asr, one interpretation, and fair evidence for that as well. But then a balanced prayer is another aspect that is being spoken of. وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. And stand up before Allah with true commitment and obedience. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ فَالرِّجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا. But if you're in danger, pray while walking or riding. فَإِذَا أَمِنْتُمْ. But when you are safe, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَمَا عَلَّمَكُمْ. Remember Allah the way He has taught you. Pray the way He were taught. This does not have to be the way you would pray when you are in danger. مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ, and He has taught you what you could not have otherwise known. وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا وَصِيَّةً لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ, and those of you who die and leave widows should leave a will in their favor, مَتَاعًا إِلَى الْحَوْلِ غَيْرَ إِخْرَاجٍ, a provision for 1 year without turning them out. Your death should not mean that they are now forsaken. They don't have a roof over their head. Give them a year is a reasonable enough time for the society to be in a mature enough place for making an alternate arrangement for them. فَإِنْ خَرَجْنَا, but if they leave on their own, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ, then there is no blame on you. This should not be binding on them. This should be a provision for them. This is not incarceration. It is a facilitation. فِيمَا فَعَلْنَا فِي أَنفُسِهِنَّ مِن مَعْرُوفٍ, for what they choose to do for themselves in an acceptable manner. وَاللَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ, Allah is mighty and wise. وَلِلْمُطَلَّقَاتِ مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and for divorced women is a provision according to what is acceptable. حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ, as an obligation upon the people of taqwa. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. That is how Allah makes His ayat clear to you, so that you use your reason. Moving right along with the next passage. Now, what we've seen so far in Surah Al-Baqarah, after the conclusion of the first half, and we spoke about the first half, the 4 ruku, introductory, some very important principles, a summary of the Meccan Quran, all of that, right? And then we spoke about the address to the Bani Israel and the significance of that. And then those transitionary passages, the next 4 passages with the transition of the Qibla taking place as well. And then the Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu address starting. Since the Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu address has started, now that the attention turns from the Bani Israel to the current believing community, obviously the current believing community also was implied, or lessons were definitely there for them in the Ya Bani Israel address as well. We spoke about that, them being a mirror of pathological religiosity, what can go wrong in the religious endeavors or the pursuit of the religious ideals in a society, how they can go very wrong, right? So that was definitely for us as custodians of Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, or addressees of that address. But since that second half began, with the change of the Qibla, with, ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah, all of that, we've seen different subjects. The organization of the ayat and the passages is not necessarily linear, in that one subject of the ihkam or the rituals, fasting and hajj is covered, and then you talk about community affairs, social affairs, marital affairs, economic affairs, and then you move on and you talk about faith and imaniyat and all of that. That's not how it is. What we see instead is that these strands are intertwined. They're not in a chain, like with one, then the second, then the third, then the fourth. They're the way the links in a chain would be. Rather, the arrangement is more concentric. They're more like strands wound in a rope, right? And they're wound around, and so there will be a back and forth. You're talking about one, you go to the other, relating that one with the other, but then carry on with that conversation, you go back to the first theme, and then you go to a third one, and then you jump to the second one, and then there's a fourth, and then there's intertwining of 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, all of this taking place, and that's the distinction and the strength in a rope-like arrangement as compared to a chain, or the links in a chain-like arrangement. That's obvious as well. So for now, we had a discussion with respect to the social affairs, marriage, divorce, all of that, and now we're going to the other strand within these passages, which addresses the infaq fi sabilillah, spending in the way of Allah, and the struggle in the way of Allah, which is a consistent theme in the second half of Surah Baqarah. Again, going back to the community in Medina, all of these things are taking place simultaneously. A community is not a place where when there's one thing going on, the other doesn't exist at all. Like, so you have fasting and Hajj being spoken of, and fasting is taking place, and the institution of fasting is being ordained, it's starting, Ramadan is being celebrated. It's not happening in a vacuum. That's a society still that has marital disputes. Divorces are taking place, marriages are taking place. All of that is happening. There's taboos, there's stigmas, there's all of that stuff that needs to be addressed, right? So it's all the way in a living society. All of these things will take place side by side. And as we see in life as well, right? If we have one huge issue, it's not going to take place, it's not going to be such that life comes to a standstill other than that issue, and life says deal with that issue, then the rest of your stuff will go on. No, life goes on, all of it side by side. One of the greatest challenges of managing challenges is that you have to do it with all of the motion, with all of the other stuff going on simultaneously at the same time. Moving right along, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ألم تر إلى الذين خرجوا من ديارهم وهم ألوف حذر الموت. So haven't you considered those people who left their homes in thousands out of the fear of death? So this incident took place after Yusha alayhi salam has conquered Jerusalem. 12 tribes have been established, but they have 12 distinct leaderships, and there's a lot of conflicts going on between those tribes, and there's always some sort of a foreign power outside of the Bani Israel, some other entity, some ruler, some military commander, someone or the other who's always invading, looking to conquer them. And then the tribes are not exactly united against them either. So from that time, another example is being brought out. A group of people who leave their homes, حَذَرَ الْمَوْتِ, for the fear of death, فَقَالَ لَهُمُ اللَّهُ مُوتُوا, and Allah said to them, die. Allah put them to death. And again, there's a varied interpretation. Is this a spiritual death? Is it a physical, actual death? Either way makes sense. ثُمَّ أَحْيَاهُمْ, then He revived them. Then He brought them back to life. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى النَّاسِ, for sure Allah is ever bountiful, gracious to people. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ, but most people are not grateful. So if this was a physical death, or a state of death from which they were revived, or it was they became spiritually bankrupt, and then there was a revivification that took place. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and fight in the cause of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا, and remember, أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ, that Allah is hearing, knowing. So what would lead people to not take a stand when they have to? And in this particular case, a stand in the form of a battle altogether would be the fear of death, the ultimate loss. The fear of losing this or that is what leads people to be extra cautious, to the point of being obsessively cautious, to the point of being excessively anxious. And it makes sense, but it is to overcome that fear, not by getting rid of it emotionally, but by doing what you have to despite its presence emotionally. That is what would count as bravery. That's what is being advocated, right? So وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, advance and fight in the cause of Allah. Death is your fear. An example or repeated examples that the Quran gives, this particular specific one, there was a people who were given that death and revived. Death, life, this is a process. This is a process. In Allah's grand structure, death is life-giving. Loss can be fruitful. Right? This is what Tawheed looks to engender. Sacrifices are not lost. It is only against one linear standard that you look at them and like, oh my God, it's gone, it's over. Now what? Yeah, that's because who told you that reality is only along that one linear standard of presence and absence? The material presence and material absence. There is so much more to it than that, right? And to be able to see that, to be able to see, and you will see that biologically as well, that it looks like something is dead and it's gone, but you dig deeper and you realize that that death was actually what gave the earth more life to produce another generation. And this takes place on a psychological plane, this takes place on a spiritual plane, this takes place on a social plane, all the time. So much of the life that we have spiritually is on account of sacrifices of our forefathers, some of our own sacrifices. أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Know that Allah is hearing and knowing. مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. So who is the one who's going to give Allah a beautiful loan? So there is a construction or a work or a creation that Allah is actively engaged in. And He is inviting people to collaborate in that project of His, in terms of putting in the work and in terms of putting in the finances as well. This is Allah's open invitation to partake with Him, collaborate with Him in the creation of something beautiful. And for that, a beautiful loan is asked for. فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ أَضْعَافًا كَثِيرًا. Allah is going to increase it manifold. He'll give it back, multiplied. وَاللَّهُ يَقْبِضُ وَيَبْسُطُ. Allah is the one who decreases and increases to begin with. It is from Him that you're getting it. And He's not even asking for all of it. He's saying just a little bit of it, a portion of it. وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. And your ultimate return is to Him. أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الْمَلَإِ مِنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ مِنْ بَعْدِ مُوسَى. Haven't you seen the leaders of Bani Israel after Musa? إِذْ قَالُوا لِنَبِيٍّ لَهُمْ ابْعَثْ لَنَا مَلِكًا. When they said to one of their prophets, send us a king. We need a leader. نُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. We will fight in the cause of Allah. How many times have we seen that? That a group of passionate people, zealous patriots, even jingoists, they want to do something for the society, for humanity, for their country. Like, we need a leader. We need one good leader, and that's it. We'll rally around behind that leader, and all good will emanate therefrom. All problems are going to be solved. We got the zeal, we got the passion, we're going to work. We just need to be organized around a leader. قَالَ هَلْ عَسَيْتُمْ إِن كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ أَلَّا تُقَاتِلُوا. So the prophet responded to them, is that possible? That when that situation arises, and you do have what you're asking for, you get a leader, you get a king, and you are asked to fight, that you refuse? قَالُوا وَمَا لَنَا أَلَّا نُقَاتِلَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They said, why would we not fight in the way of Allah? Again, that belligerent certainty, so sure of itself, leaving no room, no gap for maybe we won't. What if we won't? And then the precautions that would then be taken so as to guard against that. That's not there either. So this belligerent certainty becomes an ideal. This is what we are supposed to have. We will definitely do it. وَقَدْ أُخْرِجْنَا مِنْ دِيَارِنَا وَأَبْنَائِنَا. And they're justifying. Why would we not fight? Do you know what we've been through? We've been driven away from our home and our children. فَلَمَّا كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِتَالِ. And when they were commanded to fight, تَوَلَّوْا إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ. Most of them turned away, except a few. As confident as they were, as sure as they were, as certain as they were that they would definitely do it, they turned back. So big talk of a time in the future where there will, when it comes down to it, when the Mahdi comes, with the attitude that you currently have, in which you're not willing to clean up the mess within your own personal lives and your immediate vicinities, when the Mahdi comes, this specific attitude of evading responsibility in your immediate vicinity, in what is immediately in front of you, is going to lead for you to become his fiercest opponents when the Mahdi comes. Wallahu alimun bil-zalimin. And Allah knows such wrongdoers. وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ. And their prophet said to them, إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ بَعَثَ لَكُمْ طَالُوتَ مَلِكًا. Allah has appointed Talut as your king. قَالُوا أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا. So first up, how can he be a ruler over us? وَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْمُلْكِ مِنْهُ. When we are more worthy of kingship than him. So first problem is, why is it him, why is it not us? First, the clear-cut declaration was, we want to regain what we've lost in terms of the territory that was ours, and what we could do with that territory, with all the great stuff that we were required to do to begin with, and it has been unjustly taken away from us. We want it back. And now it's all about, okay, who's going to be the leader? He's going to be the leader. There's other people among us much more deserving of that leadership. Again, contrast with the position in Medina at that time. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in that position of leadership, but it's not without any resentment. There are people within the ranks at that time, particularly, as we know in retrospect, Abdullah bin Ubay and his cronies, who do not look fondly upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As far as they're concerned, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has displaced them. Abdullah bin Ubay was practically being crowned prior to the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That he had that political leadership that has just been taken away from him with the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there was a spiritual leadership in that community as well. I'm forgetting the name. When we come to Surah Tawbah, my notes will have the name. I will talk about that at that point. And there was an incredible resentment in that person's heart as well. And most of what went around in terms of chaos, in terms of fasad, I think it was Abu Rahib, something to that effect. In any case, those two individuals, they were the leaders in this hypocrisy that would create a lot of problems for the people of Medina. So there's this sentiment, he doesn't deserve it, I deserve it, I should have it, why does he have it, why is he doing what he's doing, and everyone sees what he's doing, I'm not being seen, I can do better than him. And how many of our efforts, small or big, how many of them are marred and tarnished because of a refusal to acknowledge this jealousy, which to a great extent is natural, is going to happen. If you haven't confronted it, you're not aware of it, but nevertheless containable. But the more you deny it, the less you look to contain it, the more it overrides you, and you think it's completely justified. وَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْمُلْكِ مِنْهُ وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَعَةً مِنَ الْمَالِ. He's not been given a lot of wealth either. قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَاهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. The Prophet responded, Allah has chosen him over you. وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ. And he's blessed him with knowledge, so he knows, and power, strength, the stature, These are the two prerequisites that is required for the particular thing that he's supposed to lead you through. Not what you have. If anything, all of that has probably made you lazy. Wallahu yu'ti mulkahu man yasha, and Allah gives power to whoever He wills. Wallahu wasi'un alim, and Allah is all embracing, knowing. وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ, and their prophet told them, إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ, the sign of his kingship is أَن يَأْتِيَكُمُ الطَّابُوتُ, that there will come to you the chest, the tabut, فِيهِ سَكِينَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ, which contains a source of contentment from your Rabb, وَبَقِيَّةٌ مِمَّا تَرَكَ آلُ مُوسَى وَآلُ هَارُونَ, and remains of what the family of Musa and family of Harun left behind. Right? So, as the ayah suggests, this inheritance of Musa alayhi salam, their relics, if you will, were lost. The Bani Israel did not have them anymore. And this particular king was able to recover them one way or the other. تَحْمِلُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, it would be carried by angels. Right? So this achievement or this grant for him is a sign for the people of his kingship. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لَكُمْ, this is for sure a sign for you, in that إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ, if you really are believers. فَلَمَا فَصَّلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ, and when Talut marched forth with the army, قَالَ, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُم بِنَهْرٍ, Allah is going to test you at a river. See, when you imagine, when you fantasize about the future and the great things that you're going to achieve, you usually fantasize the big ones, the grand manifestations of your achievement, the big results that you're going to get, the big positions you're going to have, the big speeches you're going to give, the big victories that you're going to enjoy, all of the great, big, in terms of magnitude, in terms of how many people are witnessing, all of that. In terms of the numbers, everything is big, great. What is usually forgotten, ignored altogether, is the path that may lead to that is filled with mundane stuff, routine stuff, desk work, drudgery, right? The normal, everyday stuff. To be able to regard the routine, mundane activities as great, as incredible, as awesome, and to give them that diligence and meticulous attention that you would to that grand opportunity, is what greatness is made of. To be able to give that achievement on a daily basis to mundane matters of routine, apparently boring stuff, a lot of it in isolation, most of it in obscurity, without anyone knowing what it is that you're up to. To take that seriously is what will then result in the achievements for whenever they have to come. So here too we see an example. You would look at the failure manifesting itself in the battlefield, refusal to fight, or cowardice over there, but here it's a drink. They're tired, they're worn out, and it's a nahar, it's a river. They're required not to drink from it. Simple command, simple routine order that they have to follow. Inna Allah mubtalikum binahrin, Allah is going to test you at a river. فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ, whoever drinks from it, فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, he has nothing to do with me. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ, but who does not drink from it, فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي, he is of me, from me. إِلَّا مَنْ اقْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ, except someone who takes a sip of it, fistful, that's okay. That's we're not going to be that rigid there. فَالشَّرِبُوا مِنْهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ, they all drank from it except a very few. They drank to their fill. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَهُ هُوَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ, so when Talut and his believing companions crossed the river, قَالُوا لَا طَاقَةَ لَنَا الْيَوْمَ بِجَالُوتَ وَجُنُودِهِ, they said, we don't have any power over Jalut, that big giant of a man, and his army today. قَالَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو اللَّهِ, those who were certain about their meeting with Allah, that they were going to meet with Allah. كَم مِّن فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرًا. How many a small group have overcome a large number, بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, with the permission of Allah. Those who look forward to that meeting with Allah, that reunion with Allah. And the inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un attitude. They look at it as an opportunity. See, we're worthy of Allah. We're going to return to Allah. So it is precisely these encounters against the odds, or against all odds, that we should be looking to prove ourselves in. That our worthiness of Allah will come in front of us. Wallahu ma'as sabirin. Allah is with the people who do sabr. Again, where is the sabr being mentioned here? In just saying nothing in the face of oppression? No, we're in the midst of the battlefield. This is as proactive as sabr gets. وَلَمَّا بَرَزُوا لِجَالُوتَ وَجُنُودِهِ. And when they advanced to fight Jalut and his forces, قَالُوا, they said, رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا. Our Rabb, pour onto us perseverance. Again, that belligerent certainty that we will definitely do it does not even leave room for this plea, this invocation. This invocation comes from a place of a very beautiful suspicion and doubt about your own self, about your own capacity. So there's confidence that is manifest, this conviction that is manifest that we see in the previous ayah, when they're like, how many times has a small group of people overcome a large group of people with the idhn of Allah? And it is their reuniting with Allah, the mulaqullah, that is giving them this motivation to say that, to hold themselves strong, to continue going. But then in their dua, you see that the other part, the self-doubt, the suspicion of their own commitment, capacity, ability, that also creeps in, that also slips through the cracks. Not only slips through the cracks, it is addressed maturely in front of Allah, where it should be addressed. رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا. Our Rabb, pour perseverance onto us. We need every ounce of sabr we can possibly get. وَثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا. Hold our feet firm. Make sure we stand steadfast. وَانصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. And help us against the disbelievers. فَهَزَمُوهُمْ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And so they defeated them with the permission of Allah. وَقَتَلَ دَاوُدُ جَالُوتَ. And David killed Goliath. Dawood alayhi salam killed Jalut. وَآتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah granted him kingdom and wisdom. وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ. And taught him from whatever he willed. وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ. And had Allah not restrained people by means of others, checked one group by means of another, لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضِ. There would have been chaos on earth. It has to have come when there is aggression on the part of one group. That aggression has to be checked, contained by another. Otherwise, it would have been complete chaos. It could have been complete chaos. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. And Allah is always gracious to the people. تِلْكَ آيَاتُ اللَّهِ. These are the ayat of Allah. Now, what kind of ayat are these? These are ayat of history. These are historical lessons. These are historical ayat telling us about Allah, about the sunan of Allah, about how, about the habits of Allah, about the ways of Allah. نَتْلُوهَا عَلَيْكَ بِالْحَقِّ. Which we recite to you with truth. وَإِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And without a doubt, you are one of the messengers. تِلْكَ الرُّسُلُ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. These are the messengers. We've exalted some over the others. مِنْهُمْ مَنْ كَلَّمَ اللَّهِ. There is one from them who Allah spoke to. Musa alayhi salam. وَرَفَعَ بَعْضَهُمْ دَرَجَاتٍ. And He raised some of them in ranks. وَآتَيْنَا عِيسَى ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. And we gave clear ayat, clear signs to Isa, the son of Maryam. وَأَيَّدْنَاهُ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ. And we aided him with the Holy Spirit. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا قَتَتَلَ الَّذِينَ مِن بَعْدِهِمْ. If Allah wanted, people after him would not have fought with each other. مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. Especially after clear signs had come to them. وَلَكِنْ اخْتَلَفُوا. But they did differ. But they did ikhtilaf with each other. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ آمَنَ. So some of them came to believe. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ كَفَرَ. And others disbelieved. It is through this ikhtilaf that the worthiness of individuals in their choices to believe or not come forth. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا قَتَتَلُوا. If Allah wanted, they would not have fought against one another. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَفْعَلُ مَا يُرِيدُ. But Allah does what He wants. In taking away the freedom of ikhtilaf, the freedom of choice is basically a freedom of ikhtilaf. Some will choose to say yay, others will choose to say nay. Right? So the doors to ikhtilaf, the doors to fighting have been opened. If Allah wants, He takes that away. Taking human freedom away and instilling a divine decree, a fixed divine decree that cannot be moved hither or thither. Allah equates that with His own freedom being taken away. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَفْعَلُ مَا يُرِيدُ. Allah does what He wants. You take human freedom away, you indirectly take Allah's freedom away as well. He's then just done that and that's it. No movement here or there. A free choice of human beings means there will be a free response from Allah as well to their iman and to their kufr as He deems fit. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا مما رزقناكم. Okay, I don't want to start with the next ruku, especially since it contains Ayatul Kursi right now and we have 5 minutes left. So let's close with this and we begin with the 34th ruku, ayah number 254 tomorrow. Insha'Allah. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.